Hi everybody and welcome to today's ISE webinar. Today we're going to be talking about student unions and how important it is for employers to engage the student unions and get a bit of an insight into what's happening on campus at the moment in these very unusual times, and hopefully we'll get a bit more realistic picture than sometimes I think we see in the media on a daily basis at the moment. So my name's Steve Ishwood. I'm Chief Exec of the ISE. If you haven't taken part in one of our webinars before, they're relatively informal. We keep them conversational. We're really keen to hear from you as an audience, any questions you've got. So on the platform, you've got a question box. Drop a question in. If I can, I'll weave it in as we go along. If not, we've left about 10 minutes at the end to cover any questions. So please really do put those questions on. We always do our best to answer all of them as they come through. You'll get a recording of this webinar. The software we use automatically records it. At the end of the webinar, a bit later this afternoon, you'll get a link so you can revisit that webinar. Please do share it with your peers. We're keen very much to share as much learning as we can do during this COVID crisis, and also you'll be able to look at that webinar for there's no time on it because it sits on our YouTube channel. So that's enough for me. Let's get started. So we do some introductions first. I'll go around our panelists in the order that I see them on my screen. So Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hi, yeah, I'm Rebecca Smith and I'm the Chief Exec at Huddersfield University Students' Union.
Thanks, Rebecca. Antonia, would you like to go next?
Yep, so my name is Antonia Fraser. I'm the Director of People for Leeds University Union.
Thanks, Antonia. Angela, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name's Angela and I am the President of the African and Caribbean Society at the University of Leeds.
Thanks, Angela. And by no means least, Lauren.
Hello, I'm Lauren Huxley and I am a former student union officer at Leeds University Union and now have just started in a new role at the Lifelong Learning Centre at the University of Leeds.
Fantastic. So we have a very, very Yorkshire flavour today. So fantastic to have you all on the webinar. Right, so let's crack into the content. The first question I've got is for you, Rebecca. So could you just give us a bit of an insight into how student unions work? So I'm guessing quite a few people on this webinar may never have dealt with a student union. You know, I'm sure it's very different now to how it used to be in my days as a student. So yes, give us a little bit of an insight into their role, their structure, and how they work.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously, as you were saying earlier, I think most people know about student unions now from some of the news that goes out. And you'd think we were a hotbed of radicalism at the moment with all the things that you hear, particularly in the Daily Mail. But essentially we're quite boring in lots of ways. I mean, we're highly regulated charities and come in completely different shapes and sizes, which is probably the biggest difference between us and a lot of other registered charities across the country. We've got three main charitable objectives, and I think that's the thing that holds us all together, and gives us that level of consistency. And we offer independent advice and support. We represent students academically, so we have networks of course reps or academic reps which pick up on the issues, the student voice, and kind of reflect those back to the university where there are issues. And then the third objective that we have is that we provide social activities, and that is primarily through clubs and societies, but that's also through an events program. So all of us have to hold to those three objectives and we have to demonstrate that we're delivering them. So that's probably why, for me as a chief exec, it isn't that kind of newsworthy stuff that you see on a day-to-day basis. We have to sort of deliver an impact to students, and obviously the students in our university are our members, and that's who we are beholden to. And each university's got kind of slightly different personality, different strategies, different types of student that are there, and we very much have to reflect the students that are in our organisation and not reflect the students that you see across the country. Having said that, just a kind of sort of idea about the number of us and things like that, there's over 650 of student unions. And I think where things have changed a lot, apart from becoming registered charities and more regulated from 2010, I think a lot of the changes are that further education establishments are developing student unions more and more. So that number, that's 650 plus, and so over 7 million students, a lot of them are in further education. And so that is a voice that you're kind of seeing more and more, that 16 to 18-year-old voice. And although their student unions are smaller, it then means that once they're coming to university, they're kind of used to student unions and making the most of them. The boards of student unions are very, very different, and that comes really around to the officer role. So we are led by elected officers, and they are voted in by students, and then they play this kind of combined role of being an elected officer, a staff member, and a trustee on the board. And that's a really interesting dynamic to manage. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily all go to plan, but essentially they are there, you know, to make sure that they can carry out all three roles effectively, and they're supported by external voluntary trustees or other student trustees, and that mix, as a chief exec, you're sort of trying to manage that dynamic all the time and making sure it works in the best possible way for students. I think I'll just I suppose I'll just do one final point, and that is why is it important in terms of what we do in our activity. And I think the main thing is that we are student led, and that is where we're different. So when a student is saying that they have been on a committee of a society, it isn't, you know, if it was a university-based committee, they may have someone doing a lot of that work for them. If they are an SU, a students' union committee member, they have the structures in place to support them, advise them, empower them, but we're looking for them to actually deliver those skills, you know, and do that work themselves. And I think that's a really key ingredient when you're thinking about employability, about what a students' union is.
Right. And student unions do a lot more than just bars and sports clubs, don't they? I mean, that was my interaction with the student union when I was at university. I mean, there's a few university committees that I sit on around the country, and actually quite often it's student union officers that are the student voice on those, you know, very much involved in the governance of the university.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, we don't have a bar at Huddersfield. There's no bar. So commercial activity, again, I think just comes back to reflecting the sort of personality and the structure of that particular university. And if it's a very large university, then obviously there's a lot of commercial activity. Some student unions have no commercial activity at all. So, you know, I think those stereotypes, you can't apply them across the board.
So you mentioned, yes, the dreaded Daily Mail headlines at the moment. I mean, what is the reality of what's happening on campus at the moment? You know, what are you know, in terms of leading a student union and sabbatical officers you're working with? What are you having to deal with at the moment?
Well, you could, yeah. I mean, it's just massive change. I think in you know, everything that's going on at the moment is about, obviously, how do you deliver a high quality higher education virtually and safely. And we are active in those conversations across the summer. We were there supporting students with accommodation issues, with graduation issues. You know, we are in all those conversations within the university, talking about how far online learning should go and what the impact of that is on mental health, welfare, all those things. So yeah, we're kind of in the middle of all that. And obviously we're also, as our primary funding comes from universities, we're kind of steeling ourselves for the impact of, you know, what happens if students aren't coming to universities this year. We're all still waiting to see what enrolment looks like, and obviously the massive impact of international students not being in the same numbers as they were previously. So yeah, it's massive change. Yeah.
And I mean, it must be tough. I mean, I think that's the thing that gets missed sometimes is we're all dealing with huge uncertainty, you know, particularly freshers, you know, been through the whole A-levels crisis, and now the difficulties of trying to adjust to what is a very different environment to campus, where, let's be honest, none of us really know exactly how this is going to play out over the next few months.
No, not at all. And I think, you know, it's for universities, it's a real challenge for them to sort of think about you know, that the academic side is one focus, but it's the whole rounded experience of being at university that you have to keep remembering. And some universities have almost backed off that and said, okay, you know, we can't deal with it all, we'll just focus on the academic side. And student unions are very much there, sort of saying it's more than that. You know, you've got to think about the knock-on effects, you know, of the whole experience for students, and we're very much pushing on that side of things.
Got it. Yes, no, very difficult time. Thanks, Rebecca. I'm sure we'll come back to you as the convocation progresses. And just a reminder, anybody, if you've got any questions that you want to ask our panelists, please drop them into the dialogue box, and I will ask them. We keep all your microphones muted because with so many on these calls, I think if we try to do a hands up for questions, we'd all end up very much talking each over a bit Donald Trump style. So we don't want that, do we? So Antonio, can I just turn to you now? So you're at Leeds, up the road from Huddersfield. Just talking a bit more about, I guess, the employability agenda, and why is it that, because I think lots of people don't realise that student unions are very active in the employability skills side of things of university work. So why is it that that agenda is important to a student union?
I'd say the primary reason is because it's important to our students. So Rebecca was talking about how student unions are student-led, and in terms of our activity and our focus, we take a lot of there's a lot of effort goes into conducting research with students, finding out what's concerning students, and then thinking about ways that we might be able to respond to that. So in our most recent piece of market research, we found that 2/3 of students felt that the whole topic of employability was particularly important to them, and that they were saying that they wanted the union to play a role in that. So, you know, we need to be agile to be able to adapt to the changing needs of students, and we've definitely seen a big rise in that agenda, I would say, over the last few years.
Sorry, I was putting myself on mute. Schoolboy error.
That's fine. So, I mean, there's a number of ways, I guess, in which we're able to contribute to that. And again, touching on some of what Rebecca's described, Leeds is one of those larger unions, and so we employ in the region of about 400 students in any given year. And those students are employed in a whole range of positions. So typically many of them are employed in things like retail and hospitality, but we also have students employed in other more highly skilled areas. So some examples from my union are we've got students who are creating digital content for our online learning offer. We've got students who are running specific social media channels for our Chinese students, which is a very specialist skill. And then we've got students in managerial positions, managing cafes and other outlets. And so a big, you know, one of our approaches, I guess, is to not be just thinking of students as, you know, just everyday employees, but we're really trying to tailor that experience so that they can maximise the benefit, I guess, that they're deriving from that employment. Rebecca also talked about student societies, and that really is the lifeblood of student unions. And you know, the reason that we've got Angela and Lauren on the call today is because they're the passionate people who are going to you know, really explain that and talk about the benefits of all of that work. But again, you know, one thing that we've recognised is that most students don't engage in volunteering activities in student societies because they want to build their CV. They engage in those things because they love dancing, or, you know, they love real ale, or whatever it is that that they're wanting to, you know, to get involved in. but and so subsequently, most of the students who engage in those kinds of things, and often in kind of leadership roles, aren't really recognizing that they're actually gaining really valuable skills from all of that. So one of the things the student union is trying to do is to help students to both kind of, to reflect on that activity, but also to really understand and be able to articulate the skills that they're gaining through those types of activities.
That's a question I was literally just going to ask you, because I was writing a piece yesterday around, and going back to my days as a recruiter, even then, I think it is a challenge, isn't it, that a lot of experiences that students get, they don't realise that's the kind of gold dust that employers are looking for. So do you see that as a bit of a challenge, getting students to understand? Because I've often found that and I'll probably pose this question to Angela and Lauren as well, is sometimes you just don't realise the skills they're getting, and don't realise that that's exactly the kind of stuff employers will look to for evidence that they've got the potential that they need.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. And I mean, we, as I said, we employ 400 students, so we interview, probably thousands of students every year. And even at the student union, we'll interview people who've been the treasurer of a club or have been a school rep. And quite often that won't even be mentioned as part of their interview, as part of their experience. And so we have been doing a lot of work to try to encourage students just to recognise all of that and think about the transferable skills that they've got. One of the ways that we've done that, I guess, is to try to make some of the opportunities that we offer more vocational and more kind of obvious. So recently we've developed a partnership with an external employer, and we've set up a digital, a micro agency offering digital marketing services, both internally but then also to some not-for-profit clients. And essentially it is just a marketing agency in miniature, run by students from the student union. So the students and the volunteers that have engaged with that over the past year or so have really had some good real life experiences of, client relationship management, of project management, of, delivering to briefs, of, pitching stuff to clients not liking what they've done, or, misunderstanding the brief. And all of that is really, really valuable and very sort of real life kind of experience that students can take on to future employment. So I think there is a lot of value within within the traditional work that student unions does, but also I think seeking to find some of those more kind of vocational opportunities is a good way of being able to help students to sort of make that link and articulate the value of what they've done to employers.
And when we first met Antonia, it was an introduction through Jane, who's Director of Careers at Leeds, who's also one of our board members. So do you work quite closely with Career Services on this agenda? Yeah,
we work extremely closely with the Careers Service. I think, to support the development of their work. Student unions, Rebecca talked about the academic representation and the fact that, one of the roles of the union is to be the critical friend to the university. And whilst a lot of that activity is focused on the academic experience, it does also cover those other services as well. The relationship we've got with Careers at Leeds is very, very strong, and they recognise, I guess, the value in having easy access to students, access to student leaders, and being able to kind of hear from them what it is that they're looking for from the Careers Service. I think some work that we've done in the last few years has kind of reflected the particular interests and some of the campaigns that student officers have wanted to run, and I think that's really helped our careers service to, for example, recognise some of the challenges that some of our Black students face in the recruitment marketplace, and think about how some of their support can be better tailored to some specific groups of students. So yeah, that kind of lobbying and campaigning side of the union does also come into play when we're thinking about how universities offer those kind of employability services to students.
And have you got students actually on campus yet at Leeds, Antonia?
Yeah, we've got lots and lots of students on campus. So our Freshers Week was last week, and this week is term 1. Leeds is very committed to, again, you know, Rebecca talked about kind of different approaches. Leeds is very committed to maintaining a high quality student experience. So, you know, we've got all our services open. Leeds are exploring face-to-face teaching and are encouraging schools to deliver blended learning with a mix of face-to-face and online. It's fair to say that the footfall that we're seeing on campus is significantly down on what we would normally expect. But yeah, students are here and they're getting on with it.
Gotcha. Yes, I was speaking to a couple of universities that had staggered their start dates, which is why I asked. Actually, I should have asked that of you, Rebecca. Are your students back at Huddersfield as well?
Yeah, it's the same timing as Leeds. Much quieter than usual, but again, Huddersfield were keen to deliver blended learning, but probably seeing about 20% of the numbers we'd normally see on campus. And there's, as I say, international students. I mean, that's over 20% of our student population, and there's very few. So that's the big impact for us, really, rather than home students.
Got it. Lauren, can I turn to you now? I think it's about time we heard a bit of a student voice in this conversation. So just remind me, Lauren, if you've graduated and you're working now, is that right?
Yes, that's right. So I spent 5 years studying at the University of Leeds, doing an undergrad and a master's degree. Then I spent 2 years as an officer, and now I've just started working here.
Yay, fantastic.
You can't get rid of me.
There are jobs out there, yes, which I think is one of the messages we are keen. I mean, we can't pretend that it's not a difficult year, but there are still recruiters recruiting. We think about 80% of the graduate vacancies that we work with will still be live this year. So yes, it's great to see that that you got something and it's going well. So Lauren, just talk to, because we were going to talk to you about, so you've kind of, I guess, worked very closely in university, you've come out the other end, and I think one of the questions that I wanted to ask was how has being involved in societies help you develop your skills?
God, I think that is something I've really realised over the last 3 months while I've been searching for jobs. Like, as Antonia pointed out, I don't think before that, even though I banged on to everyone as an officer about all the skills all of these committee members were gaining from their experiences, I hadn't yet been in the position where I'd had to articulate that myself to anybody. And that did take me some time. But the list is just endless, like the amount of things that I did. And also, you've got to remember that these committee members are doing this all off their own backs as well, which I think is the most important thing. These are students who've said, yeah, actually, I'm not just going to come to university and do my degree. And also, I'm not just going to be a member of something. I want to be part of improving this. I want to be part of making sure that every other student has a brilliant time at university as well. And I'm willing to take on that extra responsibility whilst I'm here. The opportunity to do that gave me just endless chances for growth through university. So I was on 4 different committees before I was then a rep as well, and then I became an officer. I did the classic journey, and having been writing applications and things over the last 3 months, and thinking, gosh, I've got events management experience for very large events, which I would have to run on my own when I was dance rep. And actually, I think when you're in it as a student, and because it's a voluntary role that you're taking on, sometimes you devalue it because you're not being paid for the work. And I think it is so important that we shout about how kind of much more impressive it is that these students are just doing this, like Antonia said, out of the sheer joy and passion for the thing it is that they're doing and for making students' lives better. And also, when you go onto a committee, it's very difficult when you're elected into a role. Firstly, it's very scary to say, yeah, I think I'm the best person for this and I'm going to try and get everybody to agree with me and to vote me into this position. That's a risk, and you've got to step out of your comfort zone to do that in the first place. But also then you're elected onto a team of people that aren't necessarily your friends, that you didn't necessarily run alongside. So you have to build that network very quickly, learn to work as a team, loads of problem solving. Things crop up all the time at universities and amongst members. Things are changing so rapidly. I mean, particularly now, gosh, any committees from last year and that are going into this year. I mean, crisis management skills, everything is changing all of the time. But I do think, yeah, I've sat on a lot of panels as a student officer, and there are lots of students that just don't recognise what they've achieved in those positions. It's really important that we kind of tease that out as students, because it's really amazing that they've done that sometimes alongside a degree and another part-time job, and it's just amazing.
I think you hit the nail on the head. You're showing you've done something that you don't have to do. And it's something that if ever I do a presentation to students, that there's a real difference between doing something because you have to do it because you're told to do it because it's part of your course, whereas actually something where you can show that, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's what employers want. They want people that can, you know, it's very difficult not to slip into cliche, but that whole self-starter, you know, kind of idea and getting things done. Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Sorry. So my voice keeps going. I just wanted to echo what Lauren said, because I mean, like at the moment, it's really interesting. So sports clubs are having to go through every single government guideline, work out how they can still deliver things, then manage it safely, risk assess it. There's a lot of people in full-time jobs that aren't having to go through that much rigor at the moment in order to deliver what should be a fun activity. And I just think that sort of thing, to try and recognise that, I think is massive at the moment.
And as much as student unions are there to support people who are on committees and running societies, they're not holding their hand through all of it. They're very much, as Antonia said, they are student-led. You might go if you have a particular question, but I mean, so many of the societies at Leeds, so I was activities officer the first time, which is looking after the societies. There were so many societies that never came in with a question and were just running it all themselves and doing incredible things. So it is a lot of responsibility to take on, and it's not that they're being told every step of the way what they should be doing. That's not the setup at all.
So when you look back on your sort of your previous experiences, were you working with employers, Lauren? Were there people that were keen to come and talk to you on campus, or was it quite difficult to see employers, or you just didn't quite see how they fitted in? How did that side of things work?
I would say, me personally, I wasn't that involved with all of that. I think at the time I was just going, look at all these great things I can now do. I'm going to go and do all of them. I haven't really until very recently got to the stage where I'm thinking, what do I want to do as a career after this? But our careers centre is amazing at Leeds, and I know that they do so much stuff with employers, and they also do partner up with particular societies, because there will be certain societies who focus a lot more on that, things like women in leadership, for example. I know they do a lot of careers focused activity. And particularly our academic societies as well. I, as a student, didn't get involved with that, but then when I was an officer, I had the chance to be on the employability strategy group for the whole university, which was amazing, and seeing how people can match up. But I just think it's not people first think, when they think universities, they think, I'll go and speak to a course, or I'll go and speak to this. But actually, I think where you'll get the people with real passion for what they're doing, it is in the societies, because as we've all said, that they are doing something they don't have to be doing, and they are, I think it's quite difficult now to engage students with things that are seen as an extra. They're so time poor already, it is really difficult. So if you can tap into a society that's already doing brilliant work to build students' skills, even if, like, I was on dance societies and a theatre society, so I don't think your mind immediately goes, oh, Lauren was building loads of skills when she was competing in a dance team, but I was. And so I think it's also thinking outside of what might traditionally be seen as a developmental opportunity in that way, because there are so many things, and I will go on forever about transferable skills that come from creative activities and things like that, and I think that's maybe where employers are missing out a bit more, because they're tapping into the business societies all the time, but it's just so much wider than that.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. So going through that whole experience, when you look back, can you see a kind of, I guess, a line through the activities you did? Did it help you, I guess, kind of decide what you want to do? And does it kind of help you think, well, actually, I didn't enjoy doing that stuff, but I do enjoy doing this. So therefore, the job you've got now, it's helped you make a better decision around that first job.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I think it made me realize that what I was really passionate about was people having access to opportunities. That was what was behind all of the things that I'd used my initiative to set up when I was on a committee and when I was a rep, which I didn't necessarily realize at the time. But, you know, having time to speak through these things with colleagues from Leeds University Union and mentors, I think, oh, actually, that's what I'm really passionate about, and being able to, yeah, like I sort of mentioned, not just go, oh, well, I liked dancing, so I wanted to be on the Dance Society, but go, actually, what was it about that particular role that I wanted to do on that committee? What was it? What was behind the particular things that I wanted to do? And now, as I said, I've stayed at the university. I'm very excited about my new role. I've only been doing it for 7 days, so I'm not an expert yet, but it definitely made me go, do you know what, I'm really passionate about making sure that other students have the opportunity to have an amazing experience like I did at university, and there's lots of people still missing out on that. I think it really helps you realise your values and what it is that drives you as an individual, because that will come out through things like planning events, through how you come up with creative solutions to problems. You will be able to tease that out of that.
Cool, excellent. Right, I think we'll come back to you when we get a few more questions afterwards. So just a reminder, everybody, if you've got questions for the panel, please drop them into the question box and we will ask them at the end. So Anjola, thanks for waiting patiently. I'm trying to look from your backdrop. Are you actually on campus at the moment?
Yes, I am on campus. I'm in my accommodation currently.
Cool. So just before we get into sort of the, I guess, the topic of the day, what's it like being on campus at the moment? I mean, you're the one who's living all the stuff we're talking about. Are you and your peers generally comfortable with what's happening? Are you all nervous? Is it what's the atmosphere like?
You know what? I think having spoken to my friends and stuff, everyone's got such different opinions on stuff. Like, a lot of my friends feel quite anxious about everything, especially because of the postcode that we're in, because we all live in Hyde Park, and Hyde Park is a very, you know, student area, so there's quite a few cases that's like arose now. So quite a few of my friends are feeling quite anxious. Others are really, really laid back, like they're not too bothered. I think they haven't realized that we're still in a pandemic. But I think generally the way that I'm feeling right now is just, I just think it's a bit difficult, especially regarding lectures and kind of navigating how I want to go about this academic year, because myself and my friends were people that like to work together, and it's kind of difficult now because you need to book when you're going to the library. You can't have more than 6 people. Leeds is even on a local lockdown now, so it's just really difficult to navigate student life at this particular moment in time. But you know, I think we're gonna figure it out eventually, hopefully. Yeah.
We'll definitely get through it. So tell me a little bit about how you came to get involved in the society. It's the Afro-Caribbean Society, isn't it? What was it initially prompted you to take a role?
Yeah, I joined the African and Caribbean Society in my first year. I'm in second year now. So I just love the society. I think that they credit themselves as a home away from home and a pathway to cultural enlightenment. And I just thought, yeah, that is just a bit of me. Like, I just want to definitely be involved in the society. And I thought that I'll be doing myself a disservice if I don't apply for like an executive position. And then, you know, I applied for president and I got it. And I'm just really happy because I feel as though people join the African and Caribbean Society, they should feel the way that I felt when in it, like welcomed, you know, at home, and yeah, just very comfortable around those who are like you.
So with all the impact of Black Lives Matter over the summer, sorry, this isn't one of the questions I'd written down for you, but I just thought I'd ask it. is that heightened the work you feel you have to do? Is it going to change the nature of what you do as a society, or is it very just much reinforcing what you're doing anyway? And I ask that because I know a lot of our employers and the university members of ours are very interested to understand what they can do around this issue.
I think regarding Black Lives Matter, it kind of more reinforced why we exist as a society and stuff like that. I think it showed to us, obviously, that I think as a president, actually, because that's around the time that I became president, that it showed what employers actually care, and those that want to go the how do I say this now, the extra mile for us, if that makes sense. And I feel as though as a society there was quite a bit of I'm going to use the word pressure. I think with ACS, because there's multiple ACSs across the country, you'd see people kind of like, oh, this ACS hasn't done anything regarding the BLM movement. This ACS has done stuff. You know, it was a bit of like competition to see who was doing the most, which kind of threw me off a little bit. And I feel as though, yeah, to answer your question, it did reinforce why we exist as a society, but at the same time, it kind of opened our eyes to see how people respond to it, people's opinions on it, as a, you know, human rights movement as opposed to like a political movement. And I thought that, you know, I came in to be president at a good time, because it just showed me that people have very different perceptions. Even ACSs have different perceptions themselves of the BLM movement. I hope I answered your question then.
Sorry, yes, you did. Thanks. Sorry, that was an extra question I threw into. So they threw in. So tell me a little bit about. So you're dealing with that, and then also we've been talking about COVID, the impact of COVID. So it must be quite an interesting year to take over as president, because there's no precedence for coronavirus. So how are you adapting to coronavirus? How is the society going to function over the coming months?
Well, obviously we've had to make that general shift to online events. And the thing about online events is that obviously as a society, we've got predominantly freshers. So we've broken down to around 60% freshers in as members, sorry. So it's really difficult to kind of get people that have already been part of the society, so the second years and third years, interested. Getting interested isn't that difficult, but the older members, it's a bit more difficult because they've experienced what it's like to actually be a member of the African and Caribbean Society beforehand. And so now we found that the main thing that we need to really hone in on is promotion and kind of marketing our events. So obviously they all have to be online now, but we need to have like a 2-week period where we promote one event, if that makes sense. So we'll have an event, say on the 1st, and then we'll continue promoting an event that will be like on the 14th or something like that. Otherwise, numbers just won't correspond, if that makes sense. Like there'll be a lot less people at the first event if we didn't promote it as much as the second event, if that makes sense. That's the biggest shift that we had to make. Like previous years, they didn't need to do as much promotion because people just, you know, want to attend the events, they want to see each other physically, especially first years, you know, they just want to have that opportunity to meet as many people as possible. But this year, promotion is the biggest thing, because otherwise people just won't know and people just won't join our events.
And I guess it's quite noisy in that digital space, with everybody trying to get their messages out over digital channels via email. So sometimes it's, I think all of us, even in the commercial world, are struggling with that at the moment, with just the volume of information that comes through.
Definitely, I agree.
So do you work with employers at the moment?
Yes, we do.
So what kind of things do you do with employers? How do they engage with your society?
So essentially, we have sponsorships and we have some partnerships. The way that they primarily engage with us, I'll explain the breakdown between partnership and sponsorships. With partners, we tend to just have like a promotional relationship. So if they have events where they want to, you know, inquire or acquire some more students to get involved in their webinars or workshops, we can promote it to them, and that happens throughout the course of the year. With sponsors, our larger events, so for example our ACS ball or our variety showcase for Black businesses, stuff like that, they sponsor the event. and they also have that promotional relationship on top of that. So for example, we've got around 11 sponsors this year, and that's the way that their partnership works with us. So they'll help us with our larger events, we'll promote their events to them, graduate recruitment schemes, all that type of stuff. Like, we are their kind of pathway to more diverse application pool. That's the way I describe it.
Got it. So, and have you got any? So, how will that change over the next few months? Will the stuff that you originally did face to face move? Because I'd imagine, actually, I mean, we don't know what next year will be like, but I'd imagine balls and things are going to be very difficult to run. So, I guess the typical sort of menu that you would have for an employer support, it might be a little bit different this year.
Yeah, definitely. Well, generally, this shift has been online. So they are equally doing online events whilst we're doing online events. The larger events that we've planned, we have pushed them to second term. So like hopefully around Easter time, possibly. Just, you know, hopefully that can still happen. But the way that we are engaging with our sponsors and stuff now is that we're inviting them to our more social events that we have online, so that it's not just that academic relationship, which I think is another thing that employers can do to, you know, really tap into student groups. They can not only just use them for promotion, but also get engaged in what they are as a society. So obviously with the African and Caribbean Society, we have predominantly just Black members, so they can engage in our culture through social events and stuff like that, so they can join us. We also join them in their events. That's the way that the relationship is working this year.
And can employers do things like online skills sessions with your members? That kind of opportunity, is that something that you're looking to do as well?
Yeah, definitely. We've got that plan for this month, as it is Black History Month. So we're to do obviously our skills sessions. Pardon? Yeah, we want to obviously do our skill sessions, want to do our CV writing workshops, into law, those sort of career related events for this month and into November as well. Like with Teach First, they're one of our sponsors this year. So we have a workshop called Diversity in Education. And sorry, can you guys still hear me?
I can, don't worry. Yes, your connection is breaking up a little bit and you've frozen, but we can still hear you, so carry on.
All right, fabulous. So yeah, with one of our sponsors, they're called Teach First, and we have an event, well, sort of like an online session with them, and it's called Diversity in Education, which we are really, really excited for. So it's still kind of illustrating to our members how you can go into education as a field, but also how diversity relates to education and stuff like that. So we'll still have all of these sessions, these academic sessions, but kind of add our little own twist in it as a cultural society. Got
it, thanks. Yes, we can still hear you, Angela, don't worry, just your image is frozen on the screen, so but yeah, the connection's still got your voice coming through. No, that's fine, it's still working well. Right, so time to go over to some questions now. We've got a few minutes left before we end the session, so if you've got a question you want to present to any of our panelists, please just pop it in the dialogue box on the platform. So I've had one question through, and it's from an employer, and they're saying that actually sometimes with campuses that are so big and there's so many different ways to work with people, different organizations, what's the best way to actually work with student societies? Is it through the careers service? Is it through the student union? Is it through their alumni with the society, or is it just all of those things? Do any of you have a view on that?
Antonia.
Go on, Rebecca.
No, I was going to say it is tough because obviously you can access in all those different ways. But I think if you want to take a slightly different angle, then come through to you know, sort of part of the management team of the SU, make it a general inquiry, because what we can tell you is where there are really active academic societies or really active general societies. So in a way we can give some guidance that perhaps they wouldn't necessarily, you know, the teaching staff wouldn't always have that to hand. So if you are thinking of a different approach, it's well worth, you know, like basically making contact with us through our sort of general inquiries or our management team.
I suppose I would just add as well that I think student unions are quite open to more innovative ideas. So the micro agency idea that I was talking about earlier was formed as a result of a relationship that we had with an employer, and that's a very different style of activity to be able to offer. And you know, that gave that, you know, the reason that the agency wanted to do it is because they wanted to build their brand amongst students who were potentially interested in careers in digital marketing. And whilst there was nothing that existed that enabled them to do that easily, between us, we came up with something that, you know, gave them then access to a good range of students who had those particular areas of interest. They've subsequently now employed one of those students, and I think had times have been different, they potentially would have employed more students from that pool. So yeah, I think student unions are they're kind of quite nifty, and you know, they can just like go with crazy ideas and turn them into a reality. So it might be something that hasn't previously been thought of, that we can help with.
Lauren, can I ask you a question? Angela sort of covered this when she was talking about the amount of freshers they normally dealt with. Is that also your experience? Because I've had a question here saying that was asking about, you know, do societies mostly engage with freshers? Is that where all the activity is actually in our final year? Sort of, you know, are they dropping off and focusing on their studies by the time that comes?
I would say it completely varies between societies. Like we have some societies that are mostly postgraduate international students. Like the makeup of each society varies hugely, and as to which point in your university journey you might get involved with them. I'd say the societies that I were on were a really general mix of students at different points in their university degrees, but that isn't the case with all of them. I know a lot of our outdoor societies are postgraduate research students are particularly more interested in things like going hiking, but it just depends, and I imagine that will change and differ as well at different institutions, because of how different student bodies are. Different campuses have very different vibes as to what people tend to go for and the patterns that tends to follow. But yeah, I wouldn't say that all societies mainly freshers. Maybe at this time of the year, yes, lots of freshers are trying things out, and we run a program at Leeds University Union that's called Give It a Go. So it's the time for everybody to try out. So I think the focus is kind of September and October very much on freshers to kind of reel them in and get them involved before you lose them to another society, because you want to make sure that they commit to you first. But then I think after that, it's very much for everyone and anyone.
And
can
Angela,
can I add to that?
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
Go on, Rebecca. Yes, go on.
No, go on. Ask Angela first, and then.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask Angela a slightly different one, so why don't you go, Rebecca? I'll go back to you, Angela.
Yeah, no, I was just going to echo that. I think it is a bit like it's like a pipeline. I think that's the careers term. It's what you see is, first I would say the peak is second year, and also we see a bit of a peak where we at Huddersfield all students are able to go and do a year's work placement, and you often see they come back from that and think, actually now I know I need to get involved in something before I finish. So I wouldn't say first years are just kind of finding their feet and getting involved, you know, but they're not necessarily the committees. I mean, in the middle of the pandemic, we'd set up 150 committees with a minimum of 3 committee members on each. So that's before any freshers appeared on, you know, because they're the people that will actually lead the freshers and, you know, and do the work. So I think if anyone's thinking, oh, societies haven't got, you know, those sort of final year students involved, I don't think that's true.
Right, thanks. Yeah, so Angela, I was going to ask you that, is that because you talked about freshers, does the pattern change in the way that you deal with students as they go through their academic life?
Say that again, please, the question.
Yes, I was going to say, so you talked about freshers when we spoke a few minutes ago. Does it change how you engage with students when they get into their second year or their final year?
No, it doesn't really change. I think obviously as a society we do tend to target freshers more when it comes to our events. However, I don't think it would necessarily change, because with the African and Caribbean Society, we still do have quite a few of our older members come to like our first year events, even though like it's more targeted towards our first years.
Got it.
And I don't think it necessarily changes. No. For example, we've got sorry. I would say, for example, have a girls' nights, and although these events are more targeted towards freshers, for them to meet the girls, meet the guys, we still do have older students coming through to each of these two events. That's all I was going to say. Sorry.
That's okay. And then I've got another question. Actually, I'll ask you first, Angela. So this came from Lizzie, and Lizzie's saying, you know, she's from an employer point of view. She wants to know, what are the top tips to actually engage a society in the first place? You know, to start building a partnership if it's somebody you haven't already got a relationship with.
I'd say the top tips I'd give is, number one, understand the values of the society. So, for example, we'd have some people emailing us about sponsorship, but when I go and look at the company, our values don't align, and our desires as a society with their desires as a firm, it just doesn't match. So I feel as though understand the values of the society, number one. And with values comes the culture. Obviously, as the African and Caribbean Society, our culture is to embrace cultures, you know, is to have people accept the beauty of African and Caribbean culture. So I feel as though as a firm, if your desires align with both the value and culture, I think the relationship is going to definitely work a lot smoother. And I think equally, another tip I'd give is to make sure that your purpose in coming to the society is not solely to, say, for example, I'll give an example. There was a firm that emailed us over the summer, and I could tell that the only reason why they wanted to work with us was because obviously we are a cultural society and it's just Black students. So they wanted their diversity statistics to go up. And obviously I understand that that's an imperative for quite a few firms, but at the same time, we wanted them to come to us because, you know, they want to work with Black students, not necessarily because they just want their diversity statistics to improve, which I thought was a bit, you know, it was a bit unfair. Like, we'd love to work with you, but I don't think you value our like premise as a society, if that makes sense. I feel as though firms need to understand that you need to have value for what the society's value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think that's really important, that it doesn't just focus on the transactional, it's a much broader relationship. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Would you have anything to add to that, Lauren?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that really highlights the importance of, if you approach a society, you need to be really transparent about why this society, why, because, you know, I remember being on a committee, you'd get so many like blanket emails that clearly weren't particularly targeted at your society. They were just sending out as much as possible to hope that you would get back to them. And, you know, that isn't appealing. It isn't appealing at all. And it is about that alignment. And actually, if you, there has to be something in it for both the parties. It needs to be a partnership, and to feel like that, rather than as you said, Angela, it's not a, we want this from you, but no, what are we going to get back from that? Like sponsorship, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Angela, because that had slipped my mind completely, but that's a huge thing. Our societies are always needing more resources, and that doesn't necessarily just have to look like money, but you need to approach societies with a what can you give to them as an employer, and what is it that they will gain from engaging with you.
I think I would add as well, using the union as a broker for some of those relationships, because I think it's important to remember that societies are run by volunteers. We've got 300 odd societies at Leeds alone, and they will vary in their kind of level of interest in engaging with employers, in their ability to kind of accommodate those kind of relationships, and also just generally in their like active, you know, some of them are not very active, some of them are quite active. So I think, you know, talking to others in the union as a way of helping to broker some of those relationships and identify some of those synergies is probably helpful.
Can I add something else that's just popped into my mind as well? That obviously society committees change over every year, and I think something that's really hard about retaining relationships in terms of being an external organisation that's trying to partner with them is that isn't necessarily at the top of a committee's mind when they're handing over to the next set of students that have been elected. So ensuring that there is a plan in place for how that relationship will be retained into the future, I think is really important, is something that you forget, because a lot of the students are only in this position for 1 year. They might not be thinking after that, whereas I imagine that the organisation would be thinking further than that. So making sure that you have things in place to make sure that it can continue and doesn't just cut off in March when everything changes over.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lauren. And actually, to be fair, it's a criticism that sometimes levied at employers as well with turnover in teams, that then relationships don't always continue either. So I think it's really important to remember that we get some kind of memory and relationships as people move on. We're almost out of time, so I was just going to go to you last, Rebecca, actually, as you were the first. You started off the conversation, and just if there are any final tips from you to employers, just to answer that question before we wrap up.
No, I mean, I think we've kind of covered it with like the ways to sort of get in touch with us, and I think like Antonia said about, you know, we are much more flexible, obviously, you know, than the institutions that sometimes we represent. So, you know, do try and work with us, and we're always looking for ways to help students demonstrate, you know, like their employability skills. So if there are people out there who think we could be doing it in better ways and supporting them in better ways, then obviously that also helps us. So yeah, I just think, you know, have dialogues with students' unions, you know, and you know, because I think it would be beneficial both ways.
Right, thank you. Actually, just one last question here. I forgot to. It's only a quick one, and that's getting in touch with societies. Angela, Lauren. The question is actually, what's the best way to do it? Is it emails? Is it social media? What's the best way to get in touch?
I say email. It's easier to reply quickly to an email than social media.
Can I just add to that? If people look on student union websites, it'll normally tell them the best way to contact. So some prefer to be contacted by Facebook, some by email. But if you know, in the public realm, there will be something talking about a society and the best way to get hold of them.
Yeah, I was going to say in my experience, it differs between societies, and some will be very active on email, and some, to be honest, won't check their email all year and will do all of it on social media. So it's making sure that you know, do a bit of research, see where they're popping up, because you should be able to see if they're using Facebook and Instagram loads. Those things should be public probably, so you know, have a look and see how active they are on these things, and that will give a hint as to what they engage with most as a committee.
Cool. I think we'll end it on that top tip, Lauren. I think that's it. Is do your homework. Yes, because all societies are different, as all institutions are different, as you've all said. So it's really understand who it is that you want to work with. We're on the hour. That's been a really great session. Thank you very much indeed, and really thank you to all of you for sharing your time to do this, because I know how difficult it is on campus at the moment. The huge challenges that you are facing with. So best of luck over the coming weeks and months. And thank you everybody for joining this webinar. As I said at the start, it has been recorded. You'll get a link to that a bit later, so please feel free to share that link with your peers. We're keen to share the learning as much as possible, and also keep an eye on our future webinars. We're doing roughly one to webinar a week around subjects like this, what's happening on campus, what's happening in the policy world. We've got a whole bunch of things coming down the line, so please keep a lookout for those. So that's all from us here. Thank you very much for logging on to the webinar, and hopefully at some point we will be properly back on campus so we can meet again face to face. So have a good day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day.